Gentlemen, let's begin by your telling us a bit about your professional background and your current board. And Jose, why don't you kick off for us?
Okay. I'm currently in my 4th year as the superintendent of Socorro Independent School District here in El Paso, Texas. But before becoming a superintendent, I was what we call a school improvement officer in Houston ISD, where I was overseeing middle schools. And I was an SIO, school improvement officer, for 2 years. And prior to that, I was a middle school principal for 4 years and an elementary principal for 1 year. And the rest of my professional experience includes 3 years as an assistant principal, 3 years as a school counselor, and 3 years as a teacher. Now, the reason I mentioned how many years I spent in each position is to help aspiring superintendents understand that the key to having a successful relationship with a school board is not about how many years of experience that you've had. It's about the skill set that you acquire while performing each position that you've had. So, in my opinion, your record of success, your work ethic, your accomplishments, and your reputation will follow you wherever you go, and also will actually seal the deal for you when you're seeking a superintendent position. And in my professional experience, beginning as a teacher till now as a school superintendent, I've always worked with a predominantly minority, economically disadvantaged student population. And me personally, I come from humble beginnings, so I know firsthand that poverty is not an excuse for failure. All children, can learn and be successful, but there's some children that, and I'm sure you all would agree, who need more than what a regular school day offers. But the key as a superintendent is about how well do you work with all stakeholders to ensure the success of the students in your school district. Now, my current school board here at Socorro ISD, we include 7 members. 5 are males, 2 females, and they all bring a wealth of knowledge to our team. One board member has a background in finance, and one board member has a background in the military. A couple of board members have a background in education, and a couple of board members have a background in business. So that's what my school board currently consists of, and we have over 45,300 students in our school district and 47 schools as well. So now I'll pass it to Nick.
Thank you very much, Jose. My story deals with a lot smaller school districts in Illinois. But I should start by saying I entered the education profession as a math teacher and a coach. I've had wonderful opportunities in my career. I was a dean of students. I was an assistant principal for 4 years in a couple different roles. And my first central office position was in a job called the Director of Instruction and Staff Development for a high school district in Illinois with about 7,200 students, where I got to work with assessment data and create professional development for the district. After that job, I moved to Central Illinois and became the superintendent of Illinois Valley Central School District. I was there for 4 years. That's a school district with near Peoria, Illinois, with about 2,200 students that were preschoolers up through high schoolers. And now for the last 3 years, I've been the superintendent of Leyden High School District 212 in suburban Chicago. We are a high school only district with 2 buildings and 3,500 students. One of the interesting positions I've held in addition to my jobs is I myself have been a school board member. I served a 4-year term in Manhattan, Illinois. When I worked at a high school district, I served on the school board of the elementary district where my children went to school. In Illinois, all of our boards are elected. They all have 7 members. And I will say that I have been very blessed by the composition and the character of the board members I've not only served with but worked with. In my current position at Leyden, our boardroom has a very simple motto up on the wall, and it says, "What's best for the kids?" And so when our board members get into discussions about how to allocate resources and how to make difficult decisions, they always point up to the wall and say, "We're going to do what's best for the kids."
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. In the best of times, I think you and probably most other superintendents would agree that it's no piece of cake building a really solid partnership with the school board. There are some significant hurdles you've got to overcome typically. And why don't we talk about those, and let's start with you, Nick, this time, and just what do you see as some of the hurdles that what you might call superintendent aspirants, executives who aspire to sit in the top spot in a district, what would you like to alert them to that they should worry about?
If I were to speak to aspiring superintendents, I would tell them a lot of things about board and superintendent relationships, because that's a central piece to success in the school district. If you're not a team, if you're not rowing in the same direction, the organization's not going to go anywhere. And I would maybe start by saying that you have to be aware of both the individual and the group dynamics. You have to know what each person values on that board, but also you have to know what the group values. And so you have to spend time to get to know those board members. What I used to do when I was at Illinois Valley Central is I would have periodic lunch meetings with each board member just to sit down and get to know them and hear what was on their mind. I would send weekly emails to touch base with the board and let them know some of the things happening in the district. So there was a regular communication back and forth. Obviously, being cognizant of the fact that all those emails are discoverable, they're pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act requests, and so, but just to keep that communication open with the board. And you have to remember, ultimately, you have to decide once you know the values of your board members and the values of the board as a whole, you have to determine whether or not your values match, and ask yourself, is this place a good fit for me? I've told aspiring superintendents they have to decide what their non-negotiables are. What are those issues where you would drop your keys on the table and walk out? If there's something being asked of you that's against your character and your personal beliefs, remembering that you work for the board, they don't work for you, but you can't do things that are against your beliefs.
Right.
So unfortunately, when you think of barriers, sometimes board members get on the board for the wrong reason. They have an agenda. Maybe they're too close to a particular issue. They got on the school board because they want to fire the football coach, or they want to get rid of Common Core, or they want to lower taxes. They want to fire the superintendent maybe. They're often frustrated by something, and eventually those folks, what I've found, will realize that they only have one vote, and so they don't get to make those decisions. The group as a whole makes those decisions, and sometimes you need to shepherd your board members to understand that.
Yep.
I'll tell you, I had a very unique situation happen to me at Illinois Valley Central. I followed a longtime superintendent who had worked his entire career in that district. And a year after I became the superintendent, he ran for the school board and became one of my bosses. And
wow.
A lot of people questioned that and said, boy, he's going to be looking over your shoulder and it's going to usurp your authority. And really, I'm pleased to report that the opposite happened. He was an amazing leader. He became my biggest supporter. He provided historical perspective as we worked through issues. But that could have gone another direction. I'm happy to report that was a very positive piece to my leadership story.
I think you're a very lucky man, Nick. It could easily have gone the other way.
Yeah, and I'll stop there and hand it over to you, Jose.
That's a very interesting story there, Nick. Well, as far as hurdles, I believe that hurdles that that stand in the way of building a strong relationship with the board revolve around communication, as well as not having a mutual understanding of what the role of the superintendent is versus the role of the school board is. And from speaking to my colleagues, you know, sometimes the downfall of superintendents is just basic communication, not communicating with their school boards, as Nick indicated it. You know, in regards, I'll give you some examples, you know, pending personnel issues, you know, as Nick touched on earlier, you know, such as sometimes reassignments or non-renewals or terminations of campus or district leaders. You know, superintendents, we go to workshops, you know, throughout our careers, in which we learn that the school board does not have the authority over management issues, and some superintendents, you know, take that to heart and decide, hey, I'm the superintendent and I will make this decision because I can. Well, in my opinion, that is the wrong approach to take. You know, superintendents wanting to build a strong relationship with their board should pick up the phone or send a text or email. And as Nick said, he has lunches with his board members. So I do as well. Every Friday I send them a Friday package where I communicate some of the events that are happening. So that communication piece is huge. But you know, this courtesy by communicating with board members, you know, by the superintendent, it allows the board members the opportunity for them to ask any questions that they may have and be 100% informed if this personnel decision should make the evening news due to parents or students objecting to the decision. You know, the board members' loyalty to their constituents who disagree with the decision will be a non-factor, in my opinion, if they understand the reasons that the superintendent had for the dismissal of a popular individual. A school board, you know, may not have the authority to tell a superintendent, you know, who they can or cannot remove, but in my opinion, they have every right to ask questions about why the superintendent is making a particular decision. They should also be informed about this decision directly from the superintendent instead of hearing about it from the public or through the media. So, you know, yes, we superintendents, we have the authority to remove or terminate an employee, but that they should still have an open line of communication with school board members and give them a heads up about these type of issues before making the decision, and allow for dialogue to take place to iron out any possible disagreements or questions the board members may have. You know, one important thing to keep in mind for all aspiring superintendents is that if you're going to engage in a power struggle with your board, at the end you're gonna lose 100% of the time.
Sage advice, Jose. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, imagine we're in a room of superintendent aspirants, and you've got a couple minutes to tell them about the knowledge and the skills and maybe some other attributes they need that they should be working on before they reach the top spot. What would you tell them? And Jose, why don't you pick off on this one?
Well, what I would tell aspiring superintendents that, in my opinion, every school board wants a superintendent who's humble, who's a great team player, and who is an educational leader that can move that specific district forward in the terms of student success. I'll always say that respect is earned and not just given because you are the superintendent or because you have a doctorate or an advanced degree. If you want your board to trust you in leading their district, and again, it's their district, you have to let your actions speak louder than your words. And building a strong relationship with the board, it's not just about how you treat and communicate with your board, because some superintendents may think it's about just my relationship with the board. Well, that's false. It's also about how you treat and communicate with all your stakeholders, employees, students, parents, business leaders, and the list goes on. You know, school board members are watching, you know, especially at the beginning. They're watching the superintendent to see how he or she is interacting with the employees of the community, and that also has a huge impact on how successful the board superintendent relationship will be. A solid board superintendent relationship will you know, also depend on how successful the district is under your leadership. So as the superintendent, you have to research best practices and launch, you know, new initiative to improve student achievement. But I will say this, that before you launch a multi-million-dollar initiative in the district, you know, it'd be a good idea to present it to your board and allow them to ask questions and iron out, you know, disagreements that or concerns that they may have with the initiative, because the board will have to approve budget allocations for this new initiative. So it's best that you get buy-in from the board members first before launching the initiative with your staff. And again, superintendents should not get in a power struggle with their board and think that they can run the district by themselves. You know, it's truly a team effort that involves the board members, and in my case, I lead the district with the guidance and the support of my board members. That's you know, as a team of 8 with all of us. You know, so this year, as a matter of fact, our school board was recognized as a Texas Honor Board, which basically puts the Board of Trustees here in Socorro in the top 5 ranking in the entire state of Texas. So my success as a superintendent is due in large part to my solid relationship with my school board. And I'm like Nick, I've been fortunate. I have some outstanding board members, very supportive. Yeah, we'll have our disagreements, you know, but at the end of the day, once we come out of that back room, we are all a team and we are all on the same page. So I'll let Nick answer get his thoughts on this question.
Let me say first, Jose, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Your
Thank you.
exemplary school board and your designation.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is outstanding, Jose. Congratulations. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about relationships. I'll often tell people that there are 2 things that will make you successful in life. One is building positive relationships, and the other is having strong character. And so when I think about a board of education, you know, you have to remind yourself sometimes they're people with families and interests. You know, you need to ask them questions and get to know them just like you would anybody else. And in terms of character, if you lead with integrity and everything you do positively reflects back on the district, those relationships are strengthened, that trust is built, and you're going to be very successful in all that you do. In addition to those things, some things I would tell aspiring superintendents, it's important that you understand the difference between district governance, which is the board's responsibility, and district management, which is your responsibility. Jose, you talked about involving them in the process, but sometimes you're going to have board members that want to get in the weeds, and they start trying to make decisions that maybe aren't theirs to make. And so you have to be willing to educate people about that. Maybe use your state organization, state school board organization to help. Maybe you need to try to have your board president give reminders when it's necessary to delineate where the responsibilities lie. I would say, especially when you step into a new district as a superintendent, you need to be flexible. Those board members are used to the ways that things have been done. They're used to the way the old superintendent communicated with them, the way they built agendas. And so it's a lot easier for you to adapt yourself to the system they have. It doesn't mean you can't make changes, but you should come in and be flexible and try to facilitate that process as best you can. And the last thing I would say is transparency. Always tell your board members what you're up to. Where have you been? How are you spending your time? And when you work with your board, it's easy to fall into a situation where you relate to some of the board members more than others. Maybe you even like some of them more than others. Hasn't been my case, but when an individual board member reaches out to you for a piece of information or asks you a question, I would suggest that superintendents shouldn't reply individually. That if you're going to respond to everybody, or at least include the board president and say, one of the board members asked me this question, and so I thought I would provide the response to all of you. What you don't want to do is to start fracturing your board. If you're not all together, you can't move the district in the right direction. So do everything you can to keep that team. You know, Jose, you mentioned it as being a team of 8, and I think that's a very wise way to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we could talk about all kinds of qualities, but those are the ones that I would highlight.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. You know, some messages really have come out loudly and clearly. Collaboration, transparency, and, of course, communicate, communicate, communicate. I've got a closing question for each of you. You're both seasoned K-12 leaders. You've worked with different boards. Generally speaking, have you found that most board members arrive for their first term knowing a fair amount of governance, knowing a fair amount about this business called governing, or have you had to spend a fair amount of time getting them up to speed?
I can start on that one, Doug. It's been my experience that most people who seek a school board seat, whether it's an appointment or an election, they're doing it typically for the right reasons, but they don't understand what the role is. And so there is need to do a fair amount of mentoring and coaching. And so we've leaned heavily upon the Illinois Association of School Boards or individual board members to serve as mentors for the new board members, just to help them understand what the role is, how board meetings happen, what you can do and what you shouldn't do, how to ask questions, some of those procedural pieces. It helps to walk them along, because if you haven't done this before, it's a system, it's a structure that no one does outside of boards like this. So there is a fair amount of help that can be provided for those folks when they start.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I'm in my 4th year as a school superintendent, so I've only had the experience with this one board, and only one individual on the board is a new board member from the original group that hired me. But I will say this, that when he entered the team, I guess it was my 2nd year, you know, he did have misguided views about our school district. You know, he had several, in my opinion, he had several negative misconceptions about our district regarding district leadership, student programs, and student success. You know, but I worked hard to ensure that this new board member understood the high expectations that I had for myself, as well as for our entire Socorro ISD faculty and staff. I held several meetings with him from day one, including, and many school districts do this, including an orientation in which all of our district leaders presented on their department goals and success. Also included him in various meetings that I held with district leaders, as well as with parents and communities. So after doing all that, you know, he began to see all the hard work and all of the successes that we had accomplished and continued to accomplish. You know, so my hands-on approach and willingness to work with him, as well as all of our board members side by side, has made him one of my biggest supporters and the district supporters, and he has actually since then enrolled his daughter in our school district. She was attending a charter school here in the area. So many superintendents have to work with new board members due to elections or resignations, and it's important to work side by side with the new board members in order to establish a positive working relationship from day one. And now, like I said, he is outstanding. He is great now.
Good. Well, folks, you've heard from two extraordinarily board-savvy superintendents on how to go about building a really close, positive, and productive working relationship with your school board. And thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and taking the time to be with us today, Jose and Nick. And I wish you a good afternoon. Thank you so much.